Chapter 104. Alden got back to the dorms at 8 p.m. His feet were nearly numb from walking around in his cold, wet shoes for hours, and his messenger bag was stuffed full of paper airplanes. Stuart had liked the activity. I just never know with that guy. Paper shaping was an art form on the triplanets as well, which Alden probably should have guessed. If you had more than 30 billion people with fingers and access to paper, someone was going to come up with the idea of folding it creatively. But Stuart hadn't tried it since he was a small child. And he'd been able to justify it to himself as both art, cultural exchange, and enrichment for other Alden. Flying paper toys were the best thing the Riabi single quotee had ever seen. Stuart had been casting spells to clean up all the shredded planes when they finally cut off the call. Alden squelched his way up to the second floor of Garden Hall. Jerry, the water shaper from his class who he'd met at the party, was coming down the stairs from the third floor, her flip-flops slapping against her heels. "I was upstairs in Maddie's room," she said quickly, pulling water out of the clothes he wore today. I owed him the favor from the drinking game. Alden hadn't been that curious, but maybe she felt like she had to explain why she was in the wrong building. "I owe Eloisa," he said. "She hasn't called it in yet." Con had divided the class in half, tried to weight it by rank so it was fairer, and then sent everyone their Victor assignments. Max had gotten stuck owing Mitty. Alden didn't know if that was random, or if he needed to thank Con the next time he saw him. "Eloisa's my roommate," said Jerry. "She wants to find a way to use all the favors on the same day so that it's grander. Do you want me to dry your shoes?" 5 minutes later, barefoot and with dry sneakers in hand, he stepped into the Hunsky Lodge. It was surprisingly silent, considering all three of his roommates were in the living area. Hoyu was the only one obviously working. He had a tablet out and he was tapping his cheek with the end of a stylus. Lexi and Lute were just sitting there. "Hey," Alden said, heading toward his room. "Lexi, are you alone?" Alden glanced over. All three of them were staring at him. "Oh, Lute told you." "It's just me." Lexi crossed his arms over his chest. "You had a wizard watching your every move all day." Alden frowned. "Yes." "Why?" "Because he wanted to hang out." "And I did too." Lexi stared at him. "Do you think that's normal? Is he watching us too?" "What?" "I was in the room for 6 seconds this morning. I literally sprinted out without speaking to any of you," said Alden. "If you'd tried to start a conversation or I'd needed to do something in the shared area, I would have mentioned it. I told Lute even though we were just going to be in class together." "It's not a big deal," said Hoyu. "It is. How often is the wizard watching you?" "Why is he watching you?" "Why the hell would you?" "I didn't tell you so you could interrogate him," said Lute. "I just mentioned it because it was a noteworthy thing about our roommate. And so that none of us would be sitting around saying or doing something embarrassing when Alden walked through the door." Alden was still trying to grasp what Lute actually considered embarrassing. He had asked Stuart to translate the word dickwad, of all things. But he was shy about his job. "I deliberately avoided coming back to the room this afternoon so that I wouldn't make anyone feel like they were being observed by a stranger at home," said Alden. "See?" said Hoyu, looking back down at his tablet. "It's fine. Leave him alone." "Why are you two being so calm all of a sudden?" "Lute was entirely weirded out when he told us." "Not for the reason you seem to think," said Lute. "I was weirded out about what the wizard spy might be telling Alden about me, not what Alden might be telling him." He turned around in his chair to see Alden better. "Say nothing of what you have heard," he said dramatically, "or I'll do spooky chainer things to you." Alden sighed. "It really wasn't much except for what I already asked you about. After you kind of squeaked like that in class, the wizard spy was worried he'd upset you. He wanted me to offer you comfort." "You squeaked? What did you squeak about?" Hoyu asked. "I don't care what he squeaked about," Lexi said. "I care about the fact that the Globy is." Hoyu slapped his stylus down on the sofa beside him. "Don't call him that." "You guys don't fight about me," said Alden. "It's fine. People call me that all the time." "He wasn't saying it in a friendly way," said Hoyu. To be fair, Lexi doesn't say much in a friendly way, Alden replied. Lexi's cheeks colored. Alden didn't want to deal with this. He was pretty sure Lexi was overreacting, but he did feel bad about making the guy nervous about this kind of thing. Listen, my friend's around our age. He just started wizard college. He doesn't have summoning rights, and wizards in training who haven't earned them yet aren't allowed to call out without being monitored by a summoner. That sounds awkward to both of us, so when he goes home for the weekends, his older sister places the call for him and connects it to a tablet. We usually talk for a few hours about things like pandas, marching bands, and the day when Avowed will grow strong enough to overpower the United Nations and take our rightful place as the leaders of our species. Oh my goodness, said Hoyu, his eyes going round. Grandwich would love to hear more about that one. Lexi's face was stiff. Apparently there's like a whole process for it to make sure it happens peacefully. But we probably won't live to see it unless Earth gets a bunch more hyperboles with grand ambitions, or we start making super babies a lot faster, so don't get too excited about world domination. My dreams, said Loot, destroyed the very moment they were born. Mostly, my friend just wanted to spend time together, said Alden, and see what human school was like. And ask me about my life purpose and tell me about cannibal parrots. Did you start the Gokarech thing? People were saying it in my afternoon classes, said Hoyu. Mine too, said Loot. Someone was trying to rhyme it with other words to make a music video. My point is that people talk to their friends through their interfaces all the time. There's a girl in Intro to Other Worlds whose Swedish boyfriend stays on the phone with her for the entire class, and everyone but the teacher knows it. I realize it's uncommon that the person I was on the phone with was an Artonan, which is why I didn't hang around people having private conversations. I stayed in crowds or totally alone all day. He met Lexi's eyes. Sorry if you felt spied on. He didn't even see you, and I never told him your name. He calls every couple of weeks. I'll remind you it's coming up a day in advance next time, and I'll stay completely away from you again. Is that fine? Did you talk about me? Hoyu asked before Lexi could answer. He sounded curious, not upset, but Alden still felt nervous. I did tell him your name. And your class. Is that? I hope that's okay. Hoyu blinked. Why wouldn't it be? He's not even a summoner, and when he is, he can just look it up if he wants. He's going to be a wizard and I'm an Avowed. The system can send him information about me that I don't even know myself. I was just wondering what an alien my age thought of me. Lexi glanced at Hoyu, then Loot. He sighed. Fine. Sorry I called you Globy in an unfriendly way. Hoyu smiled and picked up his stylus. He did say something about the demon event on Matadero, Alden added after a moment's hesitation. I was sitting in a restaurant teaching him to fold paper planes. Okay, now he's making fun of us, said Loot. I totally buy an Artonan talking about politics, and I can imagine them being interested in endangered animals. But I refuse to believe the two of you were doing arts and crafts together. I don't believe you either, said Lexi. You've just got a broken sense of humor like these two. Hoyu looked at Alden. What did he say about Matadero? Not much. We just overheard someone mention it, and he said he knew two wizards that are there right now with the battle group. He said they were well respected and very talented. It's not like that's surprising, but I figured I should mention it in case you wanted to hear it. Thanks, said Hoyu. It's not a bad thing to hear. I do worry about Dad. He went back to his homework. Actually, Stuart had said more than that, but Alden wasn't sure how it would make Hoyu feel. The Artonan boy had been shockingly uninterested in whatever it was that happened on Matadero, and had instead wanted to tell Alden that the two knights who were there right now monitoring things and serving as backup were celebrating some kind of occasion. They are going to be on Earth for their honeymoon greater than, he'd said. It's very special. If you happen to see them, you should congratulate them. He seemed to be under the impression that they might all run into each other on the street one day. They decided to help fight a demon to commemorate their marriage? Alden had asked. That's So intensity level 99.9 of them, was all he could think. Marriage? No. They are not married. Honeymoon is a bad translation then. Stuart had stared off into space for a while, trying to find a better word before giving up. They've made an important decision. It's a happy one, and your planet is so comfortable compared to most postings. Everyone else agreed to yield the position to them as a gift for the next few months. Maybe I should tell Hoyu? Finding out that babysitting an entire human battle group was a vacation for the 2 nights might be a little insulting. But it was more of a relief, wasn't it? Alden felt better knowing it anyway. He pulled one of the airplanes out of his bag, straightened its wings and tossed it toward Lute, who caught it with a startled look. I knew folding paper airplanes was too specific to be a joke, he heard Hoyu say just before he closed his bedroom door behind him. Line of asterisks. Lexi and Alden didn't see much of each other for the rest of the week. Alden wasn't sure his roommate was avoiding him, but he was starting to suspect it was the case. He doesn't seriously think I have an Ertonin watching me all the time, does he? Any of out could be on a system call with a wizard without other people knowing. It came with having your brain wired into the planet's magical communications array. Alden was starting to feel like he was being punished for being honest about it. At least it's not the worst punishment, he thought as he sat in the sauna with Hoyu again on Friday, after their last gym class of the week. Ostensibly, they were doing their homework. In reality, Alden was doing his homework, and Hoyu was texting him pictures of succulent pork meat with crispy skin. "You know I'm vegan," he said during a brief period when they were the recovery sauna's only users. "But look at it." Hoyu's voice was filled with longing. "Lechin is so beautiful. And they have stewed pork knuckle and deep-fried belly and, are you trying to hurt me?" Principal Sleyca had swung by the gym as class was wrapping up to check in on them and announce that she'd be taking them all out to dinner next Friday night to welcome them to the school. She'd asked the instructors to pick the class's top overall performer for the first week, and to a lot of people's surprise, the faculty unanimously agreed it was Maricel Alcantara. She looked shocked at first, and then genuinely pleased as all the shapers and ranged meisters who'd been in her group for gym congratulated her. Her reward was selecting the restaurant for next week on the spot. The principal seemed to think that most eating establishments would need plenty of warning before she brought in more than 40 starving hero students fresh from Majifis yet to demolish their menu. Maricel had picked a Filipino place at Rosa Grove Mall that was known for its pork dishes. Hoyu was a big fan of the choice. "I'm so glad she won. I guess it would have been a little better if I'd won, but since I didn't even know there was going to be a contest or a prize, I'm just happy it's someone with great taste in food." "You have your priorities in order," said Alden. He didn't think any of them had much of a sense of who was doing particularly well in the gym until today. It was hard when they all had such different abilities. You could only catch brief glimpses of your classmates and other groups in between running, climbing, hiding, and, in Alden's case, trying out all the different supplies you'd brought. He knew Maricel had gotten the hang of compressing loose soil into floating platforms that were strong enough to hold her in the air. She could make flying dirt pancakes, and she could ride them up and down like an elevator. It was more advanced than throwing sandbags around, since she had to keep the dirt in a shape in addition to moving it through the air. She'd been practicing it in rescue. "You know, I was doing really well in rescue before I tried to make that zip line work," said Alden. "I was sure I could get it right, but so many sandbags hit the ground so hard that Khan asked me if I was actually getting a kick out of killing them. The distance was the problem. A stiff, too short zip line was basically a vertical murder pole. And since they'd been told to work on managing their skill fatigue better, Alden couldn't make one long enough. One that ran the length of the whole gym would burn his skill right out. Distance being a problem for him had surprised him a little. 100 feet of rope was 100 feet of rope in his mind, and it shouldn't matter whether it was coiled around his waist or extended out to poke and block. But Fragment had offered some insight after asking him about what he was trying and why he thought it wasn't working. "It's always hard to give advice on a skill I haven't seen before," she had said, sitting on one of the sandbags and hovering at the edge of the scaffolding beside him. But this is a problem I know very well. Shaper works similarly. The first thing they taught me in school, and one of the first things I'm teaching your classmates, is that the strongest, most properly controlled shaping happens right here. She tucked her arms in and held her hands a few inches from her chest. This is where my telekinesis holds the most weight. It's where the shapes form perfectly. The further away from here I'm working, the sloppier I am and the weaker I am. Those two weaknesses don't seem to apply to your skill, but the distance seems to matter to us in the same way. Shaping techniques fatigue more quickly when I'm further away from the elemental ground I want to mold. I have to level my talents or get entirely new ones to keep expanding the distance. She's tapped the end of his paracord. My magic isn't like a loose arrow that flies on its own after I've shot. No matter how far away I'm working, it's still connected here. To me. And I'm actively powering it. I like Fragment, Alden told Hoyu. I'm really curious about what we'll be doing in her sessions next week. They were through with the scaffolding for now. New rescue problems had been promised. Jeffy wants it to be a burning house, said Hoyu. In the gym. I told him there was a special facility at Lee Jean for that kind of thing, and it was too early for them to be taking us on a field trip to another Hero Program's campus. For some reason, he's doubled down and now he wants gym to be a footrace to Lee Jean followed by a burning house scenario. He's an aqua brute. I know. Maybe he has breathing magic that will help with smoke inhalation? Alden suggested. You're so optimistic. I've been working with him all week, and he just thinks walking through fire would be manly. Instructor Klein is starting to look like he needs a break every time Jeffy opens his mouth. Instructor Klein. The last two offense sessions had gone much the same as the first, only Alden had failed to capture the agility brute using a wider variety of tools and methods. As he'd surmised on the first day, Klein wasn't a bad teacher. He was just less enthusiastic about Alden than he was about most of the others. Almost everyone else got occasional flashes of warmth and humor from the man. The ones who didn't were a couple of whiny slackers by CNH standards. They would probably have been classified as above average in a normal school, but here the average level of effort was overachiever. And then above that, there were the people who were propelled by talent, energy, or pure unyielding grit to keep trying again and again. Alden was beginning to see that quality in some unexpected places. Astrid, for example, was hyper and a little silly sometimes. So it was easy to think she wasn't a serious person. But she had decided on that first day that she would never be able to lay a finger on Klein unless she surprised him somehow, so she'd fully committed to the idea of beating him by anticipating his next move. She couldn't actually anticipate his next move, though. She just guessed as well as she could and tried to arrive in the right location in the most unexpected way possible. That was why everyone in the group was now subject to being tackled, leapfrogged, thrown, or tripped in her attempts to create distractions for the version of Klein she had imagined in her latest "Where's he gonna be next" scenario. She was acting within the rules Klein had given them by treating classmates as environmental features rather than people. Alden wasn't Alden to her when she shoved him in front of another running student. He was a random object that might have inconvenienced the instructor for a second if everything had gone the way she had thought it would. Alden was fine with it. She was trying something. His own plans of attack were never so amazing that her randomly ruining them was a tragedy. Some people were getting pissed about it, though, and even those and other groups were starting to joke about how insane she looked, repeatedly flying through the air to land on nothing and throwing punches and kicks at places where Instructor Klein wasn't. It had to hurt her feelings at least a little, but she kept going for it. I hope Astrid kicks him at least once before the end of the quarter, he murmured. Jeffy? Hoyu was wiping his face with a spare towel. No. Sorry. I went off on my own train of thought there. Maybe Klein thinks I'm one of the whiny slackers? Or just a slacker. Alden never complained about anything in gym, so being perceived as whiny seemed unlikely. It could be the fact that I'm still figuring out my tools. I have to pause a little to think about how to use them. Maybe he doesn't like that and it makes him assume I'm slacking off. He'd try not pausing at all next time and see how it went. Did you decide on what your object is going to be for the rest of the course yet? Hoyu asked. I want to know so I can plan how to beat you up when we finally get a duel. Tool selection was on the forefront of Alden's mind, too. There are some things that will obviously work really well for protecting my body. My ponchos are so convenient. Personal protection, fairly reshapeable so that I can use them for carrying or shielding others. I like those. You hunker down, and I punch you over and over again. Eventually we find out who wins. Alden looked over at him. I'm pretty sure the faculty won't just let you hit a shielded poncho for half an hour and call it educational. But it would be educational. At least the first time. I'll let you hit one of my shields outside of the gym as much as you want. Really? That's cool of you. Alden shrugged. I don't have to be standing behind it or anything. I can just hold it out to the side to make a target for you. Still cool, said Hoyu. So you'll probably use the poncho. Well, the poncho is something I really like. He planned to keep one with him from now on. But I'm thinking it might be a waste to go with something so easy to use for gym class. If I just coat myself in magic so nothing can hit me, I'm not learning much, am I? Same thing with the gloves. I know how hands work pretty well. You grab a thing, preserve the glove, and heavy items get carried. You could still be practicing with those for hand-to-hand combat though. Learning how to protect your lower body and face in the poncho. Learning how to move your arms to soak hits with the gloves. Yeah, but let's be honest. If I'm trading punches with you guys, I'm mostly learning that I shouldn't be trading punches with you guys. Even if you didn't use boxing gloves and you just stood there smiling at me. You've probably got a lot of your stamina points sub-allocated into the formation stuff, right? Not just a lot of them. Most of them. He stretched his legs out in front of him. People sleep on Dura Brute. Nobody our age wants the stamina subclass at all because they think it's boring. And then if you're going for durability with it, you pile most of your stamina points into the formation substat or the specific sub-substats. And doing that isn't as powerful as the protective skills or spells you can choose. To start with, I'm slow. I don't do anything that looks exciting. And people don't always know this, but formation is actually pretty heavy on the mind-body front, which means the system makes me grow into the points more slowly, a little like it does for more traditional processing stuff. It works like that? My parents say it's better to think of formation as resistance to unwanted bodily deformation. So the unwanted bit of it. It's as if I'm gradually getting a stronger mental handle on what my body is supposed to be. It feels good. But it takes forever. He paused. I think I'm almost the opposite of a morph brute in some ways. I should ask Snake some questions about how fully developed morph feels to him and compare it to how my parents talk about their powers. That's awesome, Hoyu. Hoyu grinned. I think so. This is how you eventually get straight up bulletproof without having to use spells or skills to do it. But it takes a lot of points to go that far. The rank is a little concerning for me, to be honest. My parents say Dura will still work great for me if I apply myself, so I'm trusting them. You never wanted to be something else. Oh, I wanted to be every class at some point. I grew into appreciating Dura when we started having more serious discussions about what would happen when I was chosen. My parents tried to be neutral about all the classes. A lot of people aren't like that, so I'm lucky. He smiled toward the tiny cauldron in front of them. And no. You wouldn't enjoy punching me. I might not be fast and flashy, but your rabbit fist would still break before my face did. Isn't that great? Alden laughed. That's what I thought. To finish answering your question, I'm probably going to choose something more complicated than the poncho or the gloves for gym. I don't feel like the gloves give me enough chances to explore unusual skill uses, and if I have the poncho, I'll just dominate at self-defense until my magic conks out. And that's kind of self-explanatory, too. I want practice and faculty advice on a less intuitive tool, so it'll probably be the paracord or some other kind of line or rope. If I'm reasonable. Hoyu looked intrigued. What if you're unreasonable? A giant roll of wrapping paper, Alden said. Ooh. You want to make stuff out of it? I totally do. Paper shield. Paper swords, said Alden. Paper armor. Paper stretchers. Paper bags. Paper bombs. Hoyu looked confused. Well, I haven't actually figured out how to make a paper bomb, Alden confessed. But I can set things on fire and preserve them, and I need to play with it at some point. You should do it. Can you imagine Instructor Klein's face, though? If I just sat down on the floor every few minutes to cut or fold a new shape. The paracord is kind of that way already. I can't imagine what the faculty would say if I showed up with scissors and took a timeout between each session to make a new attachment for my wrapping paper weapon. Line of asterisks. An Alien Films Club was having a cookout beside Garden Hall when they arrived. Folding chairs stood in rows in front of an inflatable screen, and everyone was walking around with grilled sausages on buns. I can watch alien films, said Hoyu, sniffing the air. I don't even care which aliens. I'm not picky. Your slow cooker has beans in it. Sausages go with beans. Alden left him to become a temporary club member. As he was about to walk into the building, a delivery notification arrived for him. Confused, he turned his head to follow the directional indicator on his interface. Then he stepped over to the drone waiting by the doors. He leaned down to look at the name on the lid display. It said it was for him. I didn't order anything. The lid popped open. Inside, there was a large paper cup from the student coffee shop. As if to confirm there had been no mistake, his name was scrawled on the side in black marker. He pried it open carefully and found hot chocolate. Coconut milk hot chocolate. He knew for a fact it would be delicious because he'd had one before. It was drinkable dessert. Hoyu? Probably an apology for all the food pics when he was trying to do his homework. Alden was already on the second floor and enjoying his third happy gulp when he suddenly wondered if it wasn't from Hoyu. This could be poisoned. Or potioned. It could be full of nanotrackers or something. He looked down into the cup. He couldn't imagine any reason for someone to go to all that trouble when there were easier ways. He typed a message to his roommates. Alden, did any of you guys send me a hot chocolate from the campus coffee shop? Hoyu, no. Loot, no. Should I? Lexi, no. He shrugged and headed for their room. If I die, tell the police it was poisoned Mr. Rococo delivered by a drone, he said as he walked in. I'm halfway through and it's good, so I'm just going to finish it off. People sending you anonymous drinks? Loot asked. He was leaning against the kitchen counter, eating something that was probably Hoyu's bean stew out of a mug. Alden nodded. Yeah, it was downstairs with my name on it, but I didn't order it. Lexi was in the corner of the living room, emptying the bin on the robot vacuum. Alden had bought it for his rugs and so he would know if Gorgon might like one after all. I wondered why the bin was always empty. He should have suspected Lexi. Hoyu and Loot were both much nicer, and they would help with things if you asked. But they didn't seem to be natural chore-doers unless the chore was related to slow cookers or musical instruments. And they both thought trash cans were containers that could hold an unlimited quantity if you just kept smashing the garbage down. Thanks for emptying it, he said. Lexi grunted. Loot looked over to Lexi. It needs emptying? How did you think it worked? Alden asked. Like an incinerator? Loot said. Maybe a girl sent you the drink. A girl? Natalie. Or Hadaisa. As the weekend approached, Loot seemed to be working himself up to ask Alden to ask the Rabbit Girls if they wanted a tour guide again. That's what Alden thought was going on anyway. Their names had been popping up unusually often over the past couple of days. I don't think it was them, Alden said slowly. Natalie would have made it herself. And why would any of them send it anonymously? That doesn't. Wait, is it a thing? Is what a thing? Loot asked. Does sending someone an anonymous drink by drone mean something? Why would it? I don't know. Alden exclaimed. Maybe it goes with your island mocktail habits. I just have to check. The other day I realized that I'd made some dude on the bus angry because I didn't offer my seat to his son. You're going to manners hell, said Loot, scraping at the bottom of his mug with a spoon. He couldn't possibly have been younger than 13, said Alden. He could have been my age. Why would it occur to me to offer another healthy teenager my seat? He was as tall as me. What does that have to do with anything? You know how in old movies people say strapping young men? This kid was strapping. Fucking again. Greater than Lexi muttered in Russian. Did he have the non-avowed tag? Yes. And I looked it up after I realized I'd pissed off his scary father, and I finally found something about seating priority on Anzidora transport. But it's not like it's a rule or a law. And there aren't signs on the buses. So how are people supposed to know that it's completely different here from everywhere else? Lexi slapped the vacuum bin back down and stalked off. A second later, they heard his door slam. So, I guess he's still mad at me, Alden said into the silence. Luke set aside his cup. He's so pissy about so many things, man. I really wouldn't worry about it if I were you. Alden sighed. I'm not. He can't dim my free hot chocolate and post-spa glow too much. I just wish I hadn't screwed up with him. I was actively trying not to. Well, said Lute. Here's something that made my day confusing but that I think will brighten yours. I called my boss. Yes, Alden said immediately. He had nearly mastered all of the signs for the word chain, according to Lute, and now they just needed permission for the verbal part. Did you set up the meeting? I will be so polite on the call. I promise. I'll double check translations for my formal art tone and greetings and everything. Slow down, language nerd. My boss. Luke tilted his head. He lowered his voice. At first, the call was normal. Then I told him about you, and he gave me an impassioned speech about the importance of choosing my beholden ones wisely. But that was still normal for him. Alden raised an eyebrow at him. I'm beholden to you? Yes. Don't forget you are from now on. Luke snorted. Then he looked you up to see if you were worthy. Which I know for the fact I've got family members who've taught things to the sketchiest people in the world, so I wasn't concerned about. And he got real odd. And then really excited. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, my dear young Lute, I was so concerned you were being taken advantage of by a scoundrel. But how your budding wisdom begins to flower. Truly, you have exceeded the limitations of youth and ignorance and allied yourself. Alden stared. Lute was doing an impression and everything. His hands were flapping around excitedly. Allied yourself with a heart whose luminous purity has been laid bare before the mother herself. No, that's not. Tell him I shall inscribe his name on both my consciousnesses. Your boss is nuts. Naturally, you may teach the bare luminous heart anything you desire. Luke continued in dramatic voice. Give him cookies. The mother's favored daughter hath seen his bare heart light. Let him have all of your time and give him my number. Okay, we're not really quoting anymore. Alden could feel himself blushing. It was the commendation. It had to be. But Luke's boss was clearly an overreactor. Luke started sniggering. So tell me, Alden, did the Artonans install the 1,000,000-megawatt spotlight in your heart? Or were you born with it? He looked so delighted. Oh, come on. I was so much nicer about your weird thing. Please let me. I've got one more. Who is the mother's favorite daughter? Why did you bare your spotlight heart to her? Alden's hot chocolate was getting cold. That was fine. He could reheat it with his face. And does your light gently bathe the people you shine it on? Or is it more of a purifying fire that burns sinners to death? Hold still, said Alden. I'll shine it on you, and we'll see if you get scorched. Still grinning, Luke walked over to him. Sorry. It was just so funny. And it was a complete repeat of you getting unexpected information about me from your wizard. He stopped giving me info when you asked him to, Alden said. I do feel kind of guilty because I was going to use the chat with Parvadatur to slip you info about Shaner. Luke shrugged. But now he seems sure that vetting you would be some kind of an insult? So you can ask your wizard about me, after all. Just tell me everything he says so that I can unembarrass myself. Don't think I knew about all the stuff before I took the class. The prostration? SHHHHHH. Lute cringed. A second later, though, he was staring at Alden curiously again. I can't imagine what would make my boss act like that. It's not a big deal. He changed his tune within 5 seconds of looking up your name, so it's a big deal to him. Admittedly, it might not be to other people. He's abnormal. But you being Flash approved like that was abnormally abnormal. And saying I wanted to tutor you made me look really good. I don't care too much about that, but it's not a bad thing for sure. He directly ordered me to instruct you properly on the rules for. I'm so sorry. You don't have to do. No, it's cool, Lute said. I was going to tutor you anyway, and I expected this order to go along with it even before he decided you had glowing organs. What I meant was, direct orders from Parvati take precedence over my ass tattoo. I can't make the family brand override our actual class duties no matter how much she'd like to. Can't stiff the big C contract with a littler contract, you know? And you just became a duty. So, we'll grab a privacy booth somewhere and bill my boss for it. I can teach you the whole word chain there, and then I can teach you why word chains aren't freely available in the first place. Alden blinked. That would be laying a small but annoying mystery to rest for good. What about this weekend? Lute asked. Are you busy? No. Tomorrow morning I've got an appointment with my trainer, but I'll be done at 10. Then I'll schedule it and let you know. And? On Sunday, do you think maybe your intake friends might want to go somewhere? Like we did last Sunday. I was actually right. Not that Lute hadn't been pretty obvious. Where? I can find something. Line of asterisks. Hoyu came back to the room with plates full of sausage dogs and a story about a girl who'd been called to the True Planets for an acting role on a television show. The bean stew was vegan, and to top it off, Alden had pulled all of his containers of miscellaneous cafeteria leftovers out of the fridge. Lexi was pried from his room by Hoyu and the smell of food. A moment later, they were all sitting down at the kitchen table to eat everything in sight. You guys are like animals after your hero class, Lute observed. Alden was too busy chewing to disagree or point out that Lute ate like an animal himself 90% of the time. The exercise they were getting was one thing, but the pricey recovery potion he and Hoyu had been inhaling seemed to accelerate appetite on top of it. Alden had been so hungry on Wednesday night it had wakened him up. He had actually gotten out of bed, ordered groceries, and made a pile of burritos for himself downstairs in the community kitchen so that he wouldn't bother his roommates. The last burrito was on the table now, in fact, waiting to be consumed. I've grown 3 centimeters this year, said Hoyu. I'm trying for at least one more. Lexi, pass me Alden's spicy Chicago pickles. Giardiniera was made for sausage dogs, Alden said after he'd swallowed. You should try it, too, Lexi. Lexi glanced at him, then took a cauliflower chunk. Baby steps. Hoyu was piling giardiniera on top of his second bun. Hey, why don't you ever play for us? Lute didn't seem to realize the question was for him until nobody else answered. You want me to play the harp for you? The big one. We moved it for you. You only ever practice on the electric one with the headphones. That's so that I don't bother you all, said Lute. I only play louder pieces on Angela when you're out. I haven't heard you play since that talent show at school. That was 2 years ago. Lute looked uncomfortable suddenly. Hoyu's own face was unreadable. After you were selected, everyone was saying you'd probably stop, he said. When I heard you came to the music program instead, I thought it was good that you weren't going to quit. Lute stared down at his plate for a second, then looked back up. Yeah. I'll play for you. If Lexi doesn't mind. Why would I mind? You want the apartment to be silent 90% of the time. Lexi grunted. I knew you were a harpist when I asked you to stay here. My parents are dancers. I was a dancer until I quit to spend more time with Rither. I like music. Okay then. Lute stood. Angela has been in the mood for rock and roll lately. Line of asterisks. Alden had always been an enjoyer of music but not a connoisseur. He'd heard Lute play at the funeral and he'd thought, that sounds really nice. And he's so snobby he is using magic to make the other players better. He's probably good. He'd been mistaken. Luther was extraordinary. Alden didn't have to be a connoisseur of harpists to see that Lute's fingers moved like they owned the strings. He was as fast or delicate or passionate as the piece needed him to be. He played arrangements of popular songs, classical pieces, and folk music like they were all equally exciting. Sitting in a dorm room in comfy clothes, stuffing your face while an avowed performed a private concert on an instrument that cost more than most cars was an awesome way to end a week. And then, of course, they all had to fool around on the harp themselves. You couldn't see Lute having some kind of chemical reaction with it and not want to touch it, too. Alden's fingers had been itching to pluck it even before Hoyu asked if it was all right for them to. He tried to find the notes for Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and felt childishly pleased with himself when he did. Later, as he was reading his spell book in bed and trying to make himself recall the meanings of the logograms before they were redefined for him by the flashcard-style translations on his interface, his nightly text from Jeremy came in. It was a picture of Victor's nose and the word cat. The last few updates had been similar. Alden was assuming that someday very soon there would be a picture of Bo's left earlobe and the word boy or jerkface. "Thanks for looking after him, Jeremy," he texted. Next time he came to the island for a visit, Alden was going to plan a ridiculously anisodran activity for them to do so that Jeremy could have fun telling people back home about it. Maybe a superhuman sporting event of some kind. He hadn't seen one yet, himself, but there were supposed to be some really wild ones. He went to sleep after midnight, and the last thought he had before he closed his eyes was that he was lucky to be here. Ansidora. Apex. Chilena North. Earth. Lucky to be safe. Lucky to have found some people whose company he enjoyed. I think I can make all of this work. The boy stood in front of a white door. He didn't know how long he'd been standing there, or where he had come from, or what he was supposed to do next. No, thought Alden. He ran. Chapter 105. The white hallway was endless and empty, but he ran and ran. Sometimes he felt his heart pounding in his chest, and he heard his footsteps echoing around him. At other times, the sounds went flat in his ears, and the world felt less than real. There was just a blur and a sense of motion and a need to get away. Whenever he stopped running, the door was in front of him again. No sign was on it this time. This is a dream, thought Alden. It is to be. He willed himself to wake up. He drove his fist into the wall beside the door. It hurt, and it didn't hurt. Please let me go. I can't do this. Not yet. But the door stayed. And there was nowhere else for him to go. He stepped inside. Line of asterisks. It was the elementary school counselor's office. The box of fidget toys on the floor, the bright yellow hopper ball you could choose to sit on instead of a chair, the shelf full of picture books sorted by trouble. Bullying. Moving away from home. Your parents getting divorced. The room smelled like crayons and the vanilla candle on top of the filing cabinet. Alden had always been annoyed that the counselor would blow that candle out as soon as a student entered. "You can light it yourself if you want," said the thing behind the desk. "You've gone and given yourself the ability to do it, haven't you?" It was a while before Alden stopped pretending to care about the room and brought his eyes up to meet its featureless face. The stark white humanoid figure looked exactly the same as last time. Plasticky and plain. Its arms were resting on the desk, fingerless oval hands flat against the large calendar. On the wall behind it, there was a cork board covered in cartoon characters showing off various emotions, with the names of the feelings written beneath them. His gaze landed on the angry face. "Good," said the system. "That emotion is not the most desirable response, but it's within my expectations. Hello, Alden." "Hi there. Allow me to apologize for forcing you into a meeting you would rather not have. On rare occasions, one of my avowed follows a course that requires more attention on my part. It's an understatement to say that you have landed yourself in that category. Sorry to inconvenience you. You are not sorry. But if you were, I would tell you there is no need for you to apologize. Balancing your needs and eccentricities with your obligation to the true planets is my job." It tilted its head. "Unfortunately, this has become more complex in your case. The tools and options I may call upon are many, and they are nearly always fit to my tasks. But on the rarest of occasions, I find that my creators have failed to anticipate an outcome. At such times, I must complete my objectives in a shoddier fashion. Just tell me I've leveled, won't you? So I can tell you to fuck all the way off and leave me alone. You've leveled. Thanks. Great talking to you. I refuse all prizes and things masquerading as prizes. Let's not do this again for a few years. He turned to go. There's nothing out there but the hall. Run down it for as long as you like. Alden's hands clenched at his sides. He suddenly realized he was wearing his brown hoodie and jeans. He'd gone to bed in boxers. Guess the system dresses me however it wants here. Incorrect. I selected your dress for your own comfort. If you had a different personality type, you might have been disembodied in this place. Or completely nude. Can't you just let me go? I won't yet, said the system. This is what I meant by saying I lack the perfect tools. I have a large amount of flexibility in how and when I assign level numbers to human avowed and in how I explain those levels to you. But it's not a boundless flexibility. There are guidelines that must be adhered to. I explored a number of loopholes for your case. I ultimately discarded them. Informing you of your advancement at this time, in this way, is not ideal, but it is better than my other options. Better for who? Alden closed his eyes. He took a few deep breaths. Then he grabbed the back of a nearby chair and dragged it toward the desk. When he'd taken a seat, the mannequin crossed its arms over each other and leaned forward a little. Congratulations, Alden, it said. You've progressed. Your power has grown, and you've gained a greater understanding of the gifts you've been granted as an avowed. As it was speaking, a gold system window appeared in front of Alden with the same words written on it. At the bottom, it said, Level up, let me take your luggage +1, congratulations. In addition to strengthening your skill, your general magical capabilities are increasing. You've gained 1 additional overall level. You may now choose from the rewards list. Alden felt a little dead inside. This is a format you've seen before online. I often do it in other ways. It can look more like this, for example. Overall level, +2, let me take your luggage, level increase +1, rewards, click to select, or I might present it to a select few people this way. Wow. You've gained 2 levels. Would you like me to pick your rewards for you? Yes, no, I can also assign level upgrades in smaller or larger units. If I had contacted you at an earlier date, and you were not you, your leveling screen could have looked like another common one. Let me take your luggage +1, reward, +3 foundation points. Alden stared at the window. If you can do it however you want, isn't it meaningless? No. In the comparison of the talents between any 2 sane ranked and classed avowed, a higher level talent almost always represents a larger magical investment. As I said, I announce levels flexibly, but I'm not boundless. And it would frustrate avowed if I were too obviously unfair in doling out levels and acknowledgements. For example, your skill has now reached what I will call level 9. There are level 10 B-rank rabbit skills in use currently that have less authority bound into them than your newly earned 9. But there isn't a level 11 skill weaker than yours at this time. You called it authority, said Alden. I think that's the first time. Why would I have used the word previously? Alden swallowed. Why is it 2 at once? You're not going to do them 1 at a time for me? Or 3. That is the purpose of this meeting. When an avowed is fussy about how their levels are presented to them and likely to do it quite often, I am able to offer them a say in matters. You are the youngest person who has received such a benefit to date. I say don't call me, I'll call you. I promise I'll know when I'm about to destroy parts of my own being in search of existential freedom. The feeling was really distinctive, and I'll never, ever forget it. You don't have to give me periodic reminders that it's coming for me. I do. Discouraging avowed from carrying high burdens of free authority is one of my tasks. It's not a burden. Trust me. I'm an expert on the subject. I am aware you feel that way. Nonetheless, you will be informed periodically about your progress. If I detect a moment in which you might be willing to accept an affixation due to a fluctuation in circumstance or mood, I will remind you of the option. Alden's stomach dropped. You're going to watch me and wait for me to be tired, self-hating, careless? Why would you even tell me that? Given your situation, it seems unlikely to come up. But if it does, having been pre-informed will make you less angry, which will lessen your long-term suffering. Please stop thinking of me as cruel. The possibility of a human avowed being profoundly hurt by leveling notices is simply a problem I'm not equipped for. If anyone else were to have a similar difficulty, they would resolve it for themselves by hardly leveling at all. Alden stared down at his hands. So what are my choices? You may request the presentation format of your notices if you feel that personalizing them would help you. You may make frequency requests that will be honored in a limited way. You may schedule progress updates for yourself, to be delivered on set dates. Or you may choose to rely on my judgment, in which case I will take your mental stability and comfort into consideration as much as is feasible within the bounds of my purpose. My comfort, he said. You are about to wake up on a Saturday morning. You have had an enjoyably challenging week instead of the difficult one you were expecting. Your gym teachers have been professional and helpful, as you hoped they would be, instead of treating you very differently as you feared they might. On more than one occasion, you have felt proud of your skill's usefulness. And your recent conversation with Stuart H has reminded you that you are not alone in your pain in the universal sense, even if it is unique among your species. The system made a short waving gesture with one of its ovals, and a cup appeared on the table between them. It was from the student coffee shop, and it had Alden's name on it in black marker. I am far more limited than the being you dealt with for your last affixation. My resources and options are remote by comparison, and I am not even capable of liking you or disliking you in a manner that you would understand. Unless I'm having a very bad day. Alden blinked. But I am charged with consideration for your feelings to some extent. And your freedom of choice to a larger one. They will never be among my highest priorities, but I do not entirely neglect them when I make decisions. You're saying tonight really was the best night for it. You don't believe me. Sometimes you lie. Not very often at all. Lies to my contracted avowed are expensive, and a simple refusal to unveil a truth is free. What's up with you types? I refuse to answer. How did Hannah die? I refuse to answer. Is Bo all right? I'm not allowed to give you information about other avowed in that fashion. The cat, however, is in fine health for its age, so you can stop worrying about it dying of illness in the near future. Alden frowned. Don't you think I deserve an actual fucking signing bonus? Good, it said. That one is a source of growing resentment, and it was most ideal for you to bring it up on your own. No. You don't. You chose 3 foundation points and split them between agility and speed. You have been granted a lifetime enhancement right equal to 3 foundation points. They were not affixed from your own authority as you suspect. Alden drew in a quick breath. They weren't? No. You are deeply relieved. Good. It would have been too much. Just one thing too much for that to have been a complete lie. How does it work then? This is an answer I would rather not see posted to the internet in the morning. Alden raised an eyebrow. When do I ever tell anyone anything? So far you've been smart enough to realize that most of what you know and could share is best kept private for a host of reasons. And some of the things you feel differently about are already widely disseminated theories. You could only add another voice of support and clarification, and it would be at the cost of drawing attention to yourself. The signing bonuses, on the other hand, have not been theorized about in any significant fashion. It would not be disastrous for that to change, but it would add complexity to my work in a number of small ways that will be difficult for you to understand. Complexity added to my work on a global scale is far more expensive to manage than your unsatisfied curiosity. I promise not to tell, Alden muttered under his breath. I can grant foundation points in multiple ways, said the system. I use authority affixation almost universally, but for the early points, I can simply make your muscles stronger, your mind sharper, or your bones denser directly. and you would have received the promised 10% enhancement per point. I don't do it that way unless the avowed needs some kind of special management because it's fundamentally less valuable than the enhancement offered by affixation. It is impermanent, and a competent healer or workout program could accomplish the same. You're actually giving me information? He'd been joking about the promise not to tell. Despite your repeated glances at the angry face, you do believe that one of my primary functions is to protect your species. And you believed me just now when I said that putting out the little fires caused by you sharing such knowledge would complicate my task. You have seen a contract fail. At present, you will not take an action if you have even the faintest concern that it might bother me on a planetary level. Well, no. I don't really want to poke it and find out if the world burns. I will never tell you anything that would actually cause a global catastrophe. That's appreciated. Alden was still caught off guard by the fact that he was getting an answer from Earth at all. If the points weren't affixed and you don't usually do simple physical changes? When you choose points for your signing bonus, you are given an equivalent soul enchantment. It's a fairly expensive gift. All of the signing bonuses are. The only flaw you might have reason to complain about is the fact that 2 of the ones offered to you were not quite as foolproof as was implied by their descriptions. Alden frowned. The wardrobe change spell would have been fully system-powered and run. That means it would never have been exhausted like a true spell impression, but it wouldn't be available to you in locations without a system. As for the bonus you chose, the enchantment equivalent to 1.5 points in speed and 1.5 in agility gradually broke down while you were on Munthagund. The remnants were scoured from you, and it was replaced during your most recent affixation with a similarly effective but more powerful enchantment that is suitable for higher amounts of chaos exposure. It paused. Make of that what you will. For a moment, there was silence while Alden considered everything. He was calmer. The Earth system's sudden willingness to be honest about a subject that had been a growing sore point over the past months was probably a manipulation perfectly timed to make him calmer. But knowing that didn't stop him from being grateful for the relief. You're such a bastard, he thought. Such an awful, powerful, unstoppable, cruelly competent, probably necessary bastard. The system didn't answer. It just sat there, waiting for him to come to terms with his own helplessness. Why is it 2? He asked finally. Is it really 1 level on the skill and 1 level of free authority growth? If he forced himself to think about it, if he forced himself to measure in a way he'd been avoiding, that didn't sound impossible. He'd gained a lot of insight into Bearer since coming back to Earth. So much of it was just understanding better, but some of it was real growth. And he'd had less time to practice with his free authority, but he'd gone from nearly nothing to being able to cast a brand new spell. The growth of your skill-bound authority hasn't kept pace with the growth of your free authority, but it is closer than it might be. You have been using your skill extensively ever since you recovered the desire to. My free authority is still so little in comparison. As of right now, it's slightly less than 13% as large as the amount that has been bound into your affixation, said the system. I could have called it a level at 10 or 20% instead, but this is a nice time. I recommend that you affix it. I refuse. You are so very over-informed, Alden, said the system. I wonder if the wizard responsible might not really have wanted to watch a world burn. But if you open the rewards list, you will find I haven't held much back. There are even spell impressions available to you that aren't customarily offered to rabbits. I am aware you consider the standard options anemic. No. A creaking sound made Alden look around. The door had opened. He stood. He didn't know what weird sense of dignity or manners kept him from running again, but he walked toward it like he wasn't utterly desperate to go. You've made your decision about how you prefer to be informed in the future, said the thing at the desk. It would be ideal if you could state it aloud. Alden stopped in the doorway. He didn't turn to meet its non-existent gaze. Be as kind to me as you can, he said finally. He stepped into the white hallway. A second later, the door shut behind him and he woke up in his bed. Heart racing, sheets soaked with sweat, light in his eyes from the system window announcing officially and undeniably that he'd gained 2 levels since that early September day when he'd woken up in the woods. "Congratulations. You've grown." He swiped it away and half climbed, half fell out of his bed onto the floor. He couldn't think through mental commands. He didn't want to ask the system for something with his mouth, not even an online calculator. Caught between fear and a desperate need to know, he grabbed a marker from his desk and did scatterbrained math on the wing of a paper plane. 13% was such a huge number. 13% mattered so much more than whatever the system arbitrarily chose for levels. Because when the free authority was exactly the same amount as the bound, they are both growing. But the free grows faster. For a terrifying moment he tried exponents, and then he stopped because that wasn't right. He thought it had accelerated toward the end last time, but it wasn't like it had doubled and doubled again. Sometimes I'm pushing forward faster, sometimes slower. It feels like. I think. He stared at the numbers he'd just written without really understanding them. Why do math when his progress could change based on so many maybes? Why bother when there was such a lot of guessing involved? Why? Why does it look like I only have around a year? He'd gone from what felt like almost nothing to 13% since the beginning of September. Today was November 10th. It was just before 5 am. Maybe I was actually growing really fast right after the affixation? I couldn't cast, but I was like a storm then. What if that was wrong? What if it was slower because of that? What if I don't even have a year? The marker clattered against the desk. Alden barely made it to the toilet before he threw up. Line of asterisks, "You sick?" asked a voice from behind him. Alden closed his eyes and clung to the porcelain. "I'm fine," he said, without turning around. "Probably something I ate." Of course it's him. Lexi got up early every morning to go for a run. He wasn't the very last person Alden would like to have watching him dry heave in his underwear, but the guy was really low on the list. "You need the toilet." "No," said Lexi. "I can piss in one of the sinks." He shut the door. I think that's the nicest thing he's ever said to me. Alden almost wanted to laugh. That was good. If he could still laugh at himself, then the system really had chosen the right morning to ruin. He flushed and sat on the cold tile, trying to find all the spots of humor in the situation. He was the first person in his class to level since school had started. And he'd done a double. That speech about not agonizing over slow leveling didn't apply to him. Take that, Instructor Klein. The rabbit has talent. He was also probably the first human who'd ever vomited from fear upon receiving a level up as opposed to celebrating it, so that reduced his coolness by quite a lot. But the system sent me hot chocolate. I bet it's never bought anyone else a manipulated hot chocolate. He briefly amused himself by imagining what Luke's reaction would be if he casually mentioned over breakfast that the mystery drink was his leveling present from the contract. Maybe it sends everyone little presents, and we all just keep it to ourselves so we don't hurt each other's feelings. I bet that's the real secret to being a successful avowed manager. Yeah. He was fine. Fine enough. This wasn't what he'd hoped for, but a yearish amount of time was still long enough that he could pretend it was a problem for another day. He'd get used to having it hanging over him, right? Like that old wives' tale about how frogs in pots could be brought to a boil without trying to leap out if you did it slowly. I think that story is supposed to be a warning. I don't think I'm supposed to want to trick myself into being the clueless frog. He pulled up his profiles. The fic hadn't changed. The real one. Asterisk name, Samuel Alden Thorne. Preferred name, Alden class, rabbit rank, B overall level, 10 commendation. Exceptional bravery in the absence of obligation awarded by 4th General Low Alice Art single quote H skills, let me take your luggage. B level 9 skill type, item preservation, total isolation and preservation of enchantment. End results vary. Spell impressions, the haunting sphere, D trait, Azure rabbit trait type, movement, limited to element, ground enhancements, sympathy from magic +4, agility +3, dexterity +2.5, speed +2.5, stamina +1.75, strength +1.5, proprioception plus 1.5, appeal plus 1, visual processing plus 1, processing plus 1.75. In progress. Recommendations and merits. Social recommendation. Leafsong University, Artona 3. Emergency response merit. Leafsong University, Artona 3. **, so that's how it works then. He'd thought it would be. His bound authority's growth was being represented with the skill level boost from 8 to 9. And in his overall level number change from 9 to 10. The free authority growth wouldn't be represented until it was bound into something. There was no point in Earth counting it as a part of an avowed's overall power, since it was unusable for everyone but Alden. He assumed the fake profile would update on its own at a later date. Or maybe they were waiting for him to ask for an adjustment. He didn't want it to change right now. I need to learn an on or out spell first. Maybe two. In a few months, when the school started to get antsy about his progress, the level on the fake could get a bump and the spells could be passed off as his reward. Or possibly the ability to preserve an additional item could be, since he hadn't revealed it to anyone yet. It's going to be a little stressful to fake spell impressions if they're more complicated than light candle. Spell impressions were robo-casting, and if you paid attention to the people doing them for long enough, they started to look and sound like robo-casting. Constantine's dolphin chant involved the exact same noises being delivered in the exact same way. And when Alden cast Haunting Sphere, his fingers moved with a very particular rhythm and no deviations from form unless he tried to screw it up or something hit his hand mid-cast. It was hard to judge what his regular casting looked like to an outsider, but he knew it wouldn't be identical every time. Guess I'll figure it out. It would be fine. He would be fine. He'd known the levels were coming. He wanted his free authority to grow. He just had a hard time wrapping his head around the price and the pace. He pushed himself up and went to brush his teeth. Line of asterisks. He'd been curled up on the sofa for 15 minutes, watching Kibby videos on his tablet, when Lexi came back. That was a quick jog. He pretended not to notice his fellow early riser had returned. Kibby produced several hours of content for every video batch. For some reason, she had decided to give him a lesson in ultra-formal table manners this time. She was in Instructor Kibby mode, and she was in the Travel Dome's dining room, explaining the significance of all the different ways place settings could be arranged. He had turned off translations so that he could pick up all the new words on his own. This was educational. And it was his version of Saturday morning cartoons to help him put his head back on straight. Snide remarks from his prickliest roommate were unwelcome. No, he thought, as he caught Lexi approaching out of the corner of his eye. See the headphones I'm wearing? See me not looking your way? You were nice about the puking, and now we're both minding our own business, aren't we? Hey. Or not. Alden looked up with his most non-confrontational smile plastered on his face. Lexi held out his hand. A thimble-sized gray cylinder with a dark red cap lay on his palm. For your stomach. He got me medicine? Alden pulled off his headphones and took the cylinder. He did recognize it as a medical something. He'd seen pictures of them but hadn't taken enough of an interest to figure out exactly what they were. The few tiny logograms on the side were translating as pause on Ruli's stomach. An injector, said Lexi. I told the dispensary it was for me. It's just an antiemetic and we're about the same size, so it's fine. Thanks. Lexi watched him turn it over in his hand a couple more times. You don't know how to use it. I can look it up. You press the cap to your abdomen and say the word for pierce in Ortonin. It burns a little. Lasts for hours. Alden wasn't nauseous anymore, but he knew an olive branch when he saw one. He lifted his t-shirt an inch and pressed the injector to his skin. Pierce. There was a pinch and a burning sensation, and a few seconds later, he realized his guts hadn't been completely back to normal because he did feel slightly better. They're so good at drugs, he noted, pulling the empty cylinder away from his skin and examining it. I've heard that those cost a few $100 gold in other places. Lexi sat down in the armchair across from Alden. Do I owe you money? No. It was free. They don't even ask what you need these ones for unless you've been requesting them frequently. My mother used 6 a day when she was pregnant with Irina. It was cool of you to pick it up for me. Sorry if you had to cut your run short to do it. Lexi looked toward the window. The sun hadn't risen yet, but there were a couple of lights on in the girls' dormitory. I don't hate you or anything. I'll take it. I don't hate you either. Freaking out about your Artonan friend wasn't even about you. Or your friend. I've just got a lot on my mind lately. You being unbelievably strange and oblivious in yet another way just set me off. Are you sure you don't hate me? Alden asked. Because those aren't things people would usually say in the middle of apologizing. Lexi turned to face him again. I wasn't taking you seriously enough when you complained about me springing loot on you. I was being a hypocrite. You were right. Yes, Lexi said. But I really did think you were just whining about me hiding social dynamics from you. I thought it was a stupid thing for you to complain about at all. I thought, why the fuck can't he figure out the social dynamics for himself? How hard can it be? Alden frowned. I'm not suffering that much. I would have figured out the potion injector on my own in a few minutes. Lexi rolled his eyes. It's not about the potion injector. Or about you constantly doing the recycling wrong. Or the fact that you don't know when to give up your bus seat. I'm doing the recycling wrong? When you tell people you're on the phone with your wizard friend, they are going to think you mean a dozen different things before it ever occurs to them that you might really mean you have a friend who is a wizard. And having a friend who is a wizard is uncommon enough on its own. If I had an Artonan friend, I wouldn't tell you about it unless you and I were close. I wouldn't give my new roommate a casual warning when I was on the phone with a wizard. I'd just let them spy. You want me not to tell you when I'm on a video call with him? Of course I want you to tell me every time an alien is watching me through the system. Now that I know, I'll go crazy wondering. But I think what I'm trying to say is you didn't owe us the warning in the first place. And if I were you, I wouldn't give that one to people in the future. That seems dishonest. Say you're on a phone call with your elderly aunt or something. Let everyone know they need to be polite. You don't have to be forthcoming about. About what? I don't know, Lexi said in a frustrated voice. It's not like I've actually thought through this particular Anzidora social dynamic before. It doesn't apply to me. But you don't have to be completely open about something that you know is going to make you look so different from everyone else. If I thought you were telling me you had an Artonan friend to brag or make yourself seem more important, I would understand you and I wouldn't say anything. But you almost never talk about your time on the Triplanets or whatever you did there. I've heard you mention it twice, and it was trivial stuff. And Khan specifically told me that you wanted it to be no big deal. I'm telling you the wizard friend might come across as a bigger deal to most people than whatever your space horror story is. They wouldn't feel that way if they'd had their own space horror stories, thought Alden. I see what you're saying. But other avowed you have Artonan friends. Like Big Snake. Lexi stared at him. He's one of the most popular superheroes in the world. He gets summoned to the Triplanets all the time, and he owned magic wolves. When he says, my wizard friend, it feels like part of a certain kind of package. It's the same with Luke's grandmother. Or with a few avowed who stop by the island twice a year and walk around fully inked and refusing to speak Earth languages, dropping 10,000 gold tips on everyone they meet. If they say something like that, people kind of know what they mean and how to take it. You're not those guys. When you say it, who knows what everyone will come up with? Alden rather wondered what Lexi had come up with. Had Alden been stuck in the Big Snake, Volra, or barely human anymore category? Somewhere totally different? He felt a fleeting temptation to give his roommate a 10,000 gold tip on the spot, just to see what happened. He squashed it. Got it. Thank you for explaining. I'll tell you guys when my friend calls. I'll tell everyone else he's my ancient aunt. Lexi stood. I'm sorry I called you Globy like it was some kind of a slur. I've been wondering if it is a slur actually, said Alden. Some people say it fondly, like your brother and Astrid. Sometimes it sounds much nastier. It's strange to suddenly meet a bunch of people our age who've just come from the other side. He shrugged. Even for me. And I'm not an idiot like half of them are. The other side. You've all lived different lives in different places. Like movie characters. I feel like the people here are the movie characters sometimes. I guess that's a mutual thing. And most of you still seem to think Eudora is just your address, Lexi continued. Like we do when we're younger kids. How else would we think of it? It's not like I've got it all figured out. Or like anyone ever puts it into words that don't sound horrible. He cast another thoughtful look toward the window. But a lot of us understand by the time we're old enough to be selected. The rest of the globe might as well be another planet. It's a planet that's a little easier to get to than the others, and the people there look like us. But no matter how much an avowed loves it, it's never going to love us back. Alden felt like he'd just taken a small, unexpected slap. Do you really feel like that? Lexi nodded. My parents were born there. They have families there. They love their old cultures, and they still can't fit back in when they go for visits. Sometimes you sound like them when you talk about Chicago, but with none of the nostalgic distance. And you don't even do it that much. Some of the other Glorbies do it a lot more. Maricel and Finley and the glowing guy. Saren, said Alden. He's unmemorable for a human light bulb. Him too. Some Anisidrans can't get enough of hearing about life on the rest of Earth. Others feel jealous that you've seen things they haven't. We've got third gens and even a couple of pure fourths in our class. No close relatives in any other country, so they'll never get visitation visas like you all do. They feel however they feel about that. So the word Globie sounds thrilled coming out of some mouths and angry coming out of others. He shoved his hands into the pockets of his jogging pants. And then there are the people like me who are just surprised to be reminded some avowed to hate it here even though this is the place that actually wants us. Alden hadn't ever thought of it in quite that way. I don't hate it here at all. I'm pretty happy. Annoyed I can't go see my family and friends for Christmas, but I like living here so far. I know. I didn't mean you. Is Lexi a tiny bit patriotic? I did not see that one coming for some reason. What kind of superhero do you want to be? Alden asked suddenly. Lexi scowled. Are you interviewing me now just because I talked to you for a few minutes? No. Yes? I just realized I didn't know. And if you don't really want off the island, I didn't say I hated the concept of traveling, he said in annoyance. Anyway, there are all kinds of different jobs I could do after graduating. I know, thought Alden, trying to smile placatingly. That's why I was asking. He wants to be avowed event security, said a voice. They both looked over to see Hoyu coming down the hall with a terrible case of TED. He yawned. You two are up so early on a Saturday. And talking about careers. Hardcore. I'm going to head home to see my family in a few minutes, said Lexi. They're back. I'd have gone last night, but Con went the second classes were over yesterday. I figured he'd be overwhelming enough on his own. He'll want to fool around here with everyone on campus today. Say hi to your parents for me. Mom and I are meeting up this afternoon, too. I'll tell Alden about your dream job. No, said Lexi. Why? It's such a good one. Hoyu yawned again. Lexi turned back to Alden. When Anisidran entertainers and athletes travel on Earth, they have at least one qualified security person with them, he said quickly. Sometimes more. They need people who can detect threats and deal with emergencies in large venues. The places they're visiting usually provide their own security, too, but the High Council decided several years ago to require specially trained avowed for all groups over a certain size. I'd like to do that. He raised his eyebrows at Hoyu as if to say, look. I communicated myself. Are you happy? That is a good job, said Alden. It also suited Lexi a lot better than a position where he'd be on camera all the time. Do you want to travel with your parents when they're touring? And keep an eye out for them? There are other traveling groups, too, Lexi said stiffly. He totally wants to protect his parents and the ballet company, said Hoyu. Which is lovely. So I don't see why he's acting like it's embarrassing. Lexi muttered something under his breath. Actually, though, said Hoyu, If anything goes wrong at a large event like that, the security hero only takes care of the other avowed until they've all emergency teleported out. Mostly they're on hand to protect the guests who came to the event. It's a political nightmare for a group of avowed to get ET'd out of a disaster where regular humans are getting injured. The security person is a visible reminder that the performers are performers. People who've gone somewhere to sing or dance shouldn't have to throw themselves on grenades for their audience members. But there are really unfair expectations. They think every avowed should be willing to die for them because that's what we're for. Lexi, it's 6 o'clock in the morning, Hoyu said plaintively. Lexi stared at him. It's too early for you to be mad. I can be mad whenever No, said Hoyu. I just decided. You're not allowed to be mad before 8:09 on Saturdays. Lexi's brows drew together. Hoyu nodded at him. I was sick, and Lexi brought me medicine, said Alden, feeling the need to defend him a little. He confessed he didn't hate me. And I will be learning about how to do the recycling right away. Were you doing it wrong? I guess so. There are a lot more options than I'm used to. What's the gray bin for? Metal stuff, said Hoyu. No. Lexi gaped at him. It's for things that could possibly have magical residue on them. Like that. He pointed at the injector in Alden's hand. Really? The one at home said something about rights, and it was gray, so I figured they wanted metal. I don't think I ever asked anyone. His eyes widened. Oh no. I've been doing the recycling wrong since I was 3. Tobe continued. Thanks for listening.